Hey there folks, so welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the debut album from Jamie XX, titled In Color. But first, let's begin with talking a little bit about remix albums. Now, believe it or not, even despite being an era where electronic music is bigger than ever, outright full-on remix albums don't seem to be as popular as they were, say, 5-10 years ago. I mean, sure, you'll see a couple of them in pop, especially from acts that are more on the electronic side. They want to push the success and relevance of their albums just a little bit longer by enlisting various DJs to remix some of their material. But the concept of one solitary producer remixing an entire project from another artist, that's a lot less common. Granted, we live in the era of the internet, where you can find dozens of remixes of entire projects on SoundCloud or YouTube within hours of the song or the record dropping. But to be able to infuse the entire project with a distinctive and unique personality, that's a different matter altogether. And thus you can kind of see of how big it was of a deal when Jamie XX, producer and remix artist known for working with the critically acclaimed indie pop group The XX, he teamed up with Gil Scott-Heron to make We're New Here, a full remix album of Gil Scott-Heron's album that had been dropped the previous year after 16 years of absence from the music industry. And while Jamie XX's personality had been very visible with the XX, his glassy edge synths, subtle beats, and crisp percussion paired with Gil Scott-Heron's aged vocals were so much more striking and powerful. Of course, one of his beats ended up being sampled by Rihanna and Drake for Take Care, which was a massive hit in 2012, but honestly, I always kind of like Jamie XX's original version a lot more for its greater texture and edge for me. And thus I was anticipating his upcoming debut album with a fair amount of excitement, even though I did find that second album from the XX, well, kind of underwhelming and lacking some of the melodic tightness that I really liked in their debut. But did Jamie XX manage to deliver on his own with In Color? Well, I'm here to tell you what so many other critics will likely say in the next couple of weeks. Jamie XX probably dropped one of the best electronic albums of the year. No, not even that. One of the best albums of the year, period. An eclectic, gleaming record that's a study in meticulous contradictions and organic vibrancy that I haven't heard since probably Todd Turia last year. And yet, as an album, it had only broad thematic strokes in common within its album type. As compositionally, it shies away from bubbly, retro cool to bring in a more modern, yet no less human sensibility. Or, let me put it like this. This is an album where not even a guest appearance from Young Thug could completely ruin it for me. Yes, it's that great. It's that amazing. I really loved it. So okay, the most appropriate place for me to start with this album would be in the instrumentation and production. But if you're familiar with the XX or We're New Here, you're not exactly going to be surprised by what Jamie XX delivers here. Tinkling melodies that have a ton of texture and unique character were often flitting against outside of expected progressions, gentle swells and misty atmospheric harmonies that complement them, and precise layering of waves of fuzz, reverb, grit, and backing sound to create a startlingly organic picture. The most immediate comparison that jumped out at me was Imogen Heap's last record, Sparks, especially in its ability to cultivate such a powerfully gorgeous atmosphere. But while she reached for the ethereal and the otherworldly, Jamie XX finds a raw feel of beauty, something that's more downbeat and human. There's always a primary melody or vocals that are very audible at the front of the mix, driving that main thematic through line and keeping all of your attention. But the backdrop of these songs paints a sonically massive picture, highlighting a stark contrast between the individual experience at a rave or a festival or at that dance, or the collective swell of it all. More than most albums I've heard this year, this album has such a powerful command of space and dynamics, fading between layers of distance and intimacy in a way that unifies the interweaving melodies incredibly well. Take the opening track, Gosh, which it barely begins with a melody at all, just a clattering groove, a stalking low-end beat, and a voice with a Caribbean accent declaring amazement at this thing before the beat itself picks up this melodic progression as the reverb-touched synth line just soars across the track, a distant clarion call, and oh my god, it was beautiful. Love that song. And really, those masterful transitions and the flow, they're all across this album. Elements that shouldn't make any sense or work on their own, like the doo-wop male vocals, cooing female vocals, harp-like keys, or oscillating waves of crisp percussion on sleeping sound, and yet blend together to create these moods encapsulating the heady rush of being one with the crowd, and yet the powerful feeling of loneliness being within it. There's an odd feeling of restraint on this record that's starkly different than that of the XX. The world is placed at a distance to reveal a very simple truth at its core, often encapsulated by faded pianos or the vocals of his bandmates in the XX, Romy, Madley, Croft, or Oliver Sim. It lends this album this feeling of soaring, spacious melancholy, if that makes any sense. And from the oscillating, empty quickness of SeeSaw to the odd lack of celebratory fun in the steel drums when set against lonely xylophones, faded, submerged guitars, and a blubbery beat in Obvs. The most stripped back and plain example of this, Stranger in a Room, with this tight, minimalist synth melody which builds the edge swells, smoky drums, and stuttered, noisy beats of Hold Tight, muffling a voice shouting, "What you see, you know what you want." The final track, Girl, it's like this too, with a thicker bass groove and these thinner guitars against klaxon like swells, and a hand clap booming as the pitch-shifted vocals oscillate over this dense, crowded mix. Such a powerful song that you just shout for that girl to come near. Hell, even the interlude, Just Saying, it's absolutely great, with a smoky sound that sounds like a sputtering train carrying the melody and the beat, before switching to this piano swell. The one song that might kind of feel like an outlier at first was I Know There Was Gonna Be Good Times, with Popcaan's great dancehall chorus, thick snaps, and this gorgeous synth outro. But then there's Young Thug. And look, on some level, I've got no idea how serious I'm supposed to be taking him, because his bars are such a hyperbolic parody of lecherous sex jams that I almost started laughing at it all. I was even kind of enjoying his verse, until we got to lines about molesting, or lines like, "I want to control you like voodoo." He does kind of fit the song with his voice. I just wish his lyrics actually felt structured, or even had the free-flowing organic fun like Chance the Rapper, instead of just coming across as, well, kind of incompetent. But okay, putting aside Young Thug, honestly, the lyrics really worked for me on this album. The scene is set very early on SeeSaw by showing how one's former lover hooked up with her best friend, and the loneliness that comes with seeing them together at the same event having fun. The song doing a very solid job of balancing that quest for escape, even as though you're acutely aware of your own unresolved emotions, even if it's just for a night on a stranger in a room where you're trying to hook up, even you know it's not going to really work in the end. A parallel that matches that same undercurrent of darker emotions that anchored Todd Terje's debut album, that melancholy. And that balance is damn near perfected on Loud Places, with Romy's aching melancholy paired with an old-fashioned sample and beat that reminds me of Before Today era Ariel Pink more than anything, as the guitars, drums, and hand claps get even noisier before fading out. And that's where we get one of the best songs on the record with The Rest Is Noise, which begins with this reversed and clipped synth lead that bleeds into harmonic oscillations, anchored by this low thrumming chords from a piano, before stripping it all back for these fluttering arpeggios that just brings in this huge rollicking bassy beat that the synths come through to match it. Absolutely fantastic crescendo, probably the best on the album. Holy God, it was good. Honestly, I'm a little hard-pressed to find real criticisms of this album, well, outside of Young Thug. The songs never overstay their welcome or feel too long, with maybe the exception of Hold Tight, a little long there. The plethora of ideas makes for a gorgeously inventive and yet amazingly cohesive album, and the lyrics, normally the glowing red weak spot on electronic records, they're stunningly effective, even despite their simplicity. They do exactly what electronic lyrics should do, balancing the emotion damn near perfectly. It's rare that I find an electronic music album that hits me this hard, and yet Jamie XX found a way to do it on one of the best albums that'll be dropped this year. For me, I'm thinking a light 9 out of 10 and the highest of recommendations for me. If you're a fan of electronic music, or hell, just damn incredibly well-produced, varied, and melodic music in general, dear God, the melodies on this record, you need to hear this album. Trust me, folks, I don't rave like this very often, but this, it's something special. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Yeah, I know I talked a lot about this record, but dear God, this is something special. You guys have to hear this, holy God. But until then, if there's anything else you want me to review, or anything else coming out that you think I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.